sala.
Como é que tu queres isso?
If we sit, maybe more like this.
Yeah.
This is okay, because we don't have to speak to the microphone.
No.
We just talk to each other,
Yeah,
to the people.
and then the microphone just here too.
And this is the best spot here, right?
Yeah, it's the middle.
Okay. Are you okay? You want to come this side?
No, I'm
That's
fine.
what's best for you,
Fine.
And the sound capture, so...
Oh, yes.
Because that's what the TV was asking.
Okay, looks good.
Do you want to check the sound? Or?
Yeah, we might be. Let's see.
Oh, this is actually...
The fun extinguisher.
Yeah, an artist that is living here. She said she wanted to do the setup with the chairs and something. And I was like, sure, you can bring it. Everything. Ouve-se perfeitamente? Ah, fantástico.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So we can just talk like this, with each other, and with the audience.
Very good.
Yeah. As luzes é para ficar tudo assim, fica tudo assim. Temos uma conversa.
Foi um regresso à terra natal. Argumentista Christopher Hampton esteve ontem na cidade da Horta.
And the Oscar goes to Christopher Hampton for Dangerous Liaison.
Trouxe à região o vencedor de um Oscar. Christopher Hampton esteve ontem à noite no Teatro Faialense. O argumentista natural da cidade da Horta é um dos mais galardoados homens das letras a nível mundial.
So it's wonderful to be back after nearly 70 years, because I was a baby when my father, who worked for a company called Cable and Wireless, left Faial and then went to Aden, which was the next place I spent some time, and then for 5 years in Alexandria in Egypt. And then there was a thing called the Suez Crisis, which meant that it somehow began to seem not so secure to travel around the world as an Englishman. So I was sent back to school in England, and my father went to Hong Kong, and then he went to Zanzibar. But it made for a very interesting childhood, and the kind of childhood that's particularly, I think, useful for a writer to have, the kind of childhood that makes you a sort of a permanent outsider, in a way, which is, so you're always outside looking in to different societies, and that's a very good education for a writer.
Eu contatei-o há 3 anos atrás e levou mais de 2 anos para receber uma resposta. Pronto, ela é uma super estrela no seu meio e eu não sabia se eu ia conseguir, uma resposta dele. Mas depois, quando ele respondeu tão positivamente sobre a ideia de vir à sua terra de nascimento, eu fiquei contentíssimo e então comecei a planear um momento especial. E ele disse que ia vir mesmo cá com a família, iam passar uma semana de férias na Faial, e isso foi fantástico para nós, para a Mira até cá, dos Azores Fringe e também para os Açores, porque tivemos cá o único vencedor de um Oscar que nasceu nos Açores.
Quite strange to. I mean, yesterday I walked down the street where I was born, and it is quite a strange feeling to be here. Of course, it's very beautiful here, and I feel at home.
O Christopher, com a sua família, saíram quando ele tinha apenas 2 anos de idade. Por isso, ele nunca mais tinha vindo cá. E estava a celebrar os seus 70 anos de idade, e já mais de 50 anos de carreira, como dramatista, cineasta e também em termos de realizador de teatro. E ele adorou os Açores.
I started to write plays when I was 8 or 9 years old at school in Egypt, where we put them on in the classroom, and that continued when I went back to... So I always wanted to be a writer. I have no idea why. There was no literary background in my family. My father was always very, very encouraging, even though he didn't quite, I think, grasp what being a writer might mean. But as soon as I said I wanted to be a writer when I was about 10 years old, he said, "Wonderful, you know, that's great. Start writing now." And I think that was very helpful to me, that I wasn't at home stopped from, you know, discouraged from this kind of thing. And so, yes, I wrote, I think the first substantial piece of work that I did, I wrote a novel when I was about 16, which was not very good, but it was long, so I had it gave me a lot of practice in writing. And then when I was 18 years old, I wrote a play called When Did You Last See My Mother, which was first done at university and then finally done in London and in New York, and began my career. So I've never really had a proper job of work. I've only ever been a writer. People ask me what I do. I think what I normally say is that I write for actors. I feel that's what I do. And I've been very lucky to work with a number of great actors, you know, from Anthony Hopkins to Julia Roberts to Antonio Banderas to Emma Thompson. All along the way, I've had a great relationship with actors, and so yes, so I feel I feel very privileged to have worked with so many good actors.
And of course, I think you're far away from being ready for your close-up. You're one of the hardest working men. This year, how many pieces have you done? How many works have you done this year?
Well, there have been about, I think, 4 or 5 plays in London. And then 20 years ago, I did a libretto for a musical, Sunset Boulevard, which we did in America with Glen Close, and we've just revived that with Glen Close in London. So I've had, I mean, it's been one of my busiest years this year so far.
And from what I hear, big stars are jumping in for the film version.
Well, we haven't, yeah, well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the part belongs to Glen Close, and I worked with her before on a film called Dangerous Liaison, so I know her very well. And she's just played the part in London. She's older now, 20 years on, but she's playing it more deeply now, really, than she did before. And I think she really is ready for her close-up.
Well, this is great, but anyone would fly across the Atlantic to get a kiss from Michelle Pfeiffer. I want to thank Norma Heyman and Hank Moonjean, my fellow producers, for showing a beginner the ropes. I want to thank Norma for putting me in touch with Bernie Brillstein, Peter Chernin and Eileen Maisel, without whose courage I think the film wouldn't exist, and faith in it. And finally, I want to thank the 2 co-recipients of this, Chaudelot de la Clos, who's having about as good a year as it's possible to have if you're a dead writer, and of course Stephen Frears, who created the atmosphere for everyone to be able to do their best work. So thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Michelle, John and Glenn. Thank you, France. Thank you, America. Thank you.
For you, what does that mean when you receive awards from your peers?
Well, it's very nice. The Oscar is quite a sort of double-edged. That's to say that I was delighted to receive the Oscar, and then I thought the things that I wrote after that would be that much easier to get filmed. So immediately after winning the Oscar, I chose to write a film about the desaparecidos in Argentina, and discovered immediately that winning an Oscar meant nothing when it comes to financing a difficult subject. And in fact, it took me 14 years to get the film made. And in the 6 years after the Oscar, none of the projects I wrote were made until a film called Carrington, which was the first film I directed, and I only really directed it because we couldn't find anyone else to do it. So it was, you know, it was an amazing experience to go out to Los Angeles and come home with this thing, but not exactly what one might have imagined.
Searching, I found this sentence that I believe it was from you. I don't know. I'm going to read it and see if you remember. Just because, you know, it's one of the things we always talk in the arts, which is critics. As pessoas que sabem tudo mais do que a gente. People that always seem to know more than we do them when we're doing art. Asking a working writer what he thinks about critics is like asking a lamppost what it feels about dogs.
I did.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. There's a great English writer called John Osborne, who was, I can't remember the circumstances, but he was writing to all his writer friends and saying, what do you think about critics? How have they helped you? Have they helped you? And in fact, what you just read out was the postcard that I sent to him in answer to his question.
After all these years, and of course you're working now more than most people I know that are in the business, what would you say to young people starting out that want to live their world in the arts?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is only do it if you can't think of anything else to do. I mean, only do it if you feel that you have to do it. Don't do it if you just feel you'd quite like to do it, because it does demand, I mean, it's a very up and down, inevitably a very up and down existence, and it's quite an intense existence, and I think if there's any way of avoiding it.
Hi.
Hello.
Artists have a very conflicting relationship with their hometowns usually. So what were your expectations initially? I mean, before visiting the island?
Well, luckily I had no time to have a conflicting relationship with my hometown because I was 2 years old. So I've only ever been fascinated by the idea. My brother, who's here this evening, is a little older than me, so he had very much clearer, he had memories. I had no memories. He had memories of the island, and in fact came back a few 20 years ago with my mother because they wanted to come back and visit again. My father's predecessor, also working for Cable and Wireless, was my uncle and his wife, who was my mother's sister. So my slightly older cousin was born in the same bed as I was born in the Rue Consul d'Abney, and so we have a lot of family ties with the island, but mostly I wanted to come because I couldn't remember it, and so I wanted to see it for myself, and so it's been I'm very happy to have been invited.